Welcome back, everybody. And what is the state of the current meta? We've had 2 weekends of set championships now. There's been a ton of events, and we have nearly 400 tops to kind of talk about. There's 369 that I was able to gather for the information in this video. And if you remember, I had my prediction for the best 10 decks going into set championships, and I said, it's nothing to do about the deck not being good. I just had to pick one of pretty much the decks pictured here to underperform. And naturally, I picked Steel Song to be my deck to underperform. And everybody heard that and said, you know what? We're going to go out and dominate with this deck now. So not only did Steel Song not underperform and come in at number 6, like I suggested, it actually jumped up to number 1 and pushed my 1 through 5 each down one spot. So overall, we did have the top 6 decks correct, just slightly wrong on the order. I thought maybe Discard shows up a little bit more and Steel Song would be a little bit lower. However, it pretty much happened how you would expect. And where the format is at right now, I went to 5 events. I was able to get 4 promos. We took Mushu to one and did not do very well with it. But Blurple we've been doing amazing with. And right now, I think we're kind of in an interesting format. So like when we talk about what is the format, what is it as a whole, it's kind of 3 decks, and this is going to seem very wrong until I kind of explain it a little bit. It's 3 main decks is the core, kind of like your primary colors. It's the primary decks of the format are Steel Song, Blurple, and Red Blue Shark. So you kind of have this little triangle going where Blurple is good into Red Blue Shark is good into Steel Song is good into Blurple. But then you add in these kind of neutral decks such as Ruby Amethyst, Evasive, Purple Steel Bounce, and then your discard decks where you add these 3 kind of in and you get your secondary colors, if you will, where they're not necessarily bad versus the 3, but they're also not great against like the broader spectrum. They're kind of more neutral and just consistent and generally good, whereas they don't necessarily just plug and play like Blurple. Difficult versus Steel Song. But like I said, versus Red Blue, it's very favorable. So you get that. Steel Song, likewise, good versus Blurple, and difficult into Red Blue. And this doesn't mean you can't win those matchups. It just means that you're unfavored in them. When I got second place at the one event, I was playing Blurple, and I beat Steel Song in top 4. Likewise, I was at events where I saw Steel Song lose in top 8 to Red Blue lose to Steel Song in top 8. So it doesn't mean you can't beat those decks. It's just kind of the core foundation of it. And I think right now, too, is Blurple's good into Red Blue. Purple Steel and Ruby Amethyst, I think, are both kind of teched and good into Red Blue as well. So that's why we're kind of seeing them creep up and be ahead of the Shark builds. But Steel Song, I think, has a slight advantage over all 3 of those decks, being RA, Purple Steel, and Blurple. And that's what's propelled Steel Song truly to the top, is that so many decks were coming in, going after the big bad bully of the room, Red Blue, and then Steel Song just kind of had a good matchup into a lot of those. Like I said, Blurple's very favorable. I think RA and Purple Steel are tilted in Steel Song's favor, and those 3 decks being where they're at, pushing Red Blue down, allows Steel Song to kind of be up a little bit higher. And then the discard decks are just, they're very consistent. They're good at what they do. Steel Song being as dominant as it is, I think, is holding discard down a little bit. Just, when they discard your hand, you whole new world and get a new one, it can be a little difficult. But overall, I think the format is healthy. I'm going to say the discard decks are just 1. We're going to call it just discard, right? So that means there's realistically 6 very, very viable strategies here. And if you want to go a little bit further, the other category still makes up 20% of the format. That's actually really healthy, in my opinion, when you got 6 very viable strategies and then everything else still makes up a fifth of the chart. It's not like every other deck makes up 5%. It makes up 19%. That's a pretty big jump. So overall, I think the format's really healthy. I'll work on a video if you guys would like, kind of talking about like how to choose your decks if that's something that interests anyone. But we're going to go to the spreadsheet then and kind of break it down a little bit more as to what's going on. So 369 total tops. Steel Song is just leading the board in top 8s, top 4s, top 2s, and first place finishes 87 total tops out of 369, which is that 24% we saw. Ruby Amethyst with 50. We saw Blurple at 45 and Purple Steel at 42. However, Purple Steel did have the second most wins out of any of these strategies. Then you go and you see your Ruby Sapphire Shark, the discard, the other Amethyst Emerald one where it's either the aggro or the more bounce version, the non-discard one, the character heavy focused builds, coming in with 9, a pretty drastic drop off there. That's why I made the cut for the other in the pie chart at this point in time, because you go from 19 down to 9. That's a 50% drop off. Then we had Jafar Wheel really coming into its own, and then some aggro decks. We had Amber Steel aggro, Sapphire Steel aggro, and Chernadogs, each with 8, as well as that Jafar Wheel deck. So all 4 of these decks can be very quick, very scary. Jafar Wheel gaining a little bit of steam since Zan Saeed won the Lucky Llama Showdown about a month ago, a couple weeks ago. Was it? Feels like time is just so weird lately. And that kind of makes up our tier 2. So when we want to go ahead and look at what other decks there are, another deck is Ruby Sapphire Items. This deck last weekend really started to gain popularity. All 7 of these tops came from last weekend, not the first weekend. So if we look at it that way, this deck actually is performing a bit higher. It just kind of took a little bit to start to figure out, but it's gaining steam, and I'm curious to see where Ruby Sapphire Items does end up. Like I said, though, the Sapphire Steel aggro being where it's at, that was my pick for the number 10 deck going into these events, and so far it's right there. It's tied for number 9. I said Sapphire Steel was a deck to look out for. I did also mention that Sapphire Steel, the Zoolander, the Blue Steel Wheel, whatever you want to call it, maybe makes a comeback, and it actually did. It got 3 tops this past weekend in set championship events. Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro also in there. The Amber Emerald discard, Lemon Lime discard, if you will. Muses, Emerald Sapphire, both Muses and Oswald items, seeing some success. 5 overall tops, 3 for the Muse Songs version, and then 2 for the Oswald item version. And there was 3 Amber Ruby decks that all took first place at their set championships. None of them were Mufasa decks. They were more song-based builds. I know one of the events was rather small. One was like 21 people, though, and I think one was 23. One did play 22 songs, and the other one played like 9 or so, so a little bit less of a song build. But Amber Ruby, nonetheless, did come in with 3 event wins, which is pretty big. If we want to go look at the color breakdown, we do this. Link for the spreadsheet is in the description down below. Anyone wants to track this stuff, I'll keep a running total, update it whenever I have time, whenever I'm able to. I'm trying to just put that information out there for you guys. Working on the deck core tabs as well. We'll have more like deck breakdown type videos for you guys based on results like this and other things like that. But if we look at overall colors, then like the color breakdown right now, Amethyst and Steel tied at 49%. 49% of topping decks are playing one of these 2 colors. Then we have Amber at 32, 27 for Sapphire, 25 for Ruby, and Emerald at 19. On the surface, that might not look too good, but it's actually pretty healthy. Earlier in the set, when it was before the ban list, we saw like Sapphire and Steel. Actually, we can go ahead and pull it up here. Sapphire and Steel with 68 and then 50%. And then post-ban list, we saw Amethyst at 56%, Steel at 42%. So Amethyst came down 7% and Steel went up 7%. And a big jump of that is Ruby came down a little bit and the Amber decks went up a bit. We saw Emerald stay relatively stagnant as well as Sapphire staying pretty much right there. So we started to see a decline in Ruby decks, mostly the red-blue, and an increase in the Steel Song decks, and even a slight decrease in Ruby Amethyst, and that's where we see the percentages changing. But overall, I think this is a pretty healthy number. There's always going to be 1 or 2 colors that are clearly the best, and then for every deck, though, to be pretty much a fifth, 19% is pretty close to 20%. Well, we got 27, 25, 32. Like, that's actually not too terrible, right? So I think it's a pretty good indicator of a healthy format over there. And if we look at the color combinations, like the mixes of each color, before set championship season, we had 3 that were unrepresented here, and it's the same 3 that are unrepresented here. So Amber Steel was the top deck before at 18%, and it's still the top deck at 26% top deck being top color combination. And with it taking up 24% of the meta, Steel Song that is, that should be no surprise whatsoever that this color combination is at the top, and Amber Steel Aggro also still right up there. So some other things we may notice, if we look, it's kind of these Amethyst decks that are just doing really, really well. Whether it's Ruby Amethyst, Blurple, or Amethyst Steel, they go ahead and make up 40% of the meta right here. Is 40%. Ruby Sapphire coming in with a good chunk. Emerald Ruby kind of was always an anti-meta choice, and just right now it's not in a great spot. Amber Sapphire, you can build a pretty fun like hero princess aggro style strategy, but overall it's not it. And sadly, Mushu, it's just not quite there. When I took it to my event, Ruby Amethyst Evasive, there's just too many evasive threats. I was playing RLS Legacy and Imperial Bow, which both help. But at the end of the day, trying to be a challenge-focused deck where everything's evasive, it's very difficult, especially when you're spending your ink to move to those locations. I was playing RLS Legacy, Pete, and Lawrence as kind of my threats to be able to quest and gain lore quicker without challenging. So we did theorize that and try to come up with an idea. It was close. It worked out okay-ish. But that Ruby Amethyst Evasive was just kind of difficult. And then likewise the Ruby Sapphire decks where they're just not putting out many characters. Those were the only matchups I played that day. And it was just very difficult. I didn't have great challenge targets. We were close every game, I think I was at like 16 plus lore every single game we played. Very, very close, but close does not cut it at the end of the day. I know there's some Mushu decks too that have gotten top 8s, have gotten their promos, have even gotten top 4s. Congratulations, but for the sake of being unbiased in the video, I have to hold true to what we see at the top over here, and that is what counts as a top in the video. Again, if you got your promo, congratulations. That is awesome for all of you guys, but for the sake of it, if there's 10 to 20 people, I only count the top 2 places. If there's less than 10, I don't count it at all for the spreadsheet. 21 to 40 players is only top 4. So if you got top 8 at a smaller than 40 person tournament, that's why it's not on here. Again, congratulations, but for the sake of trying to stay unbiased and keep my personal opinions out of this style of video, I have to stay true to what we consider a top that we've been kind of just going at for like 6 formats now, and it's been working out pretty well, or 5 formats, set 3. And it's been working out really well. So we're going to hold true to that. Again, congratulations to anyone who did not make it into here, who got your promos. Awesome. Let me know down below. I will be happy to congratulate you and talk about it. But that's just kind of where we're at here. But yeah, so that's it, guys. That's where we're at. That is the format. Going just back to that spread or pie chart again, I think we're in a very, very healthy spot. I think moving forward, though, people are going to start to respect Steel Song a little bit more, which means we might start to see Red Blue kind of coming up a little bit more because people are going to tech for Steel Song, which means Red Blue is going to be a little bit better, which is also going to drive Steel Song down, which could change up how this looks next week when we update it. I don't think it's going to be drastic, but I'm just saying, keep an eye out for those trend changes, and I think it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to see a little bit of shake up across this, but we'll revisit that next week. Thank you guys for watching. As always, like, share, subscribe, comment down below.